This podcast has been developed to help you understand the expectations around Assessment Task 3. We call this assessment task the transfer of learning. It's where we want you to now take off your student hat and put on your teacher hat. Based on the experiences that you have had in this investigation, we want you to transfer the learning about the pedagogy of problem-based learning and apply that to a classroom situation. We're asking you to develop a proposal for an integrated study unit based on problem-based learning. Now, this proposal is for a specific classroom. It's for Richard Battersby's Grade 5-6 Integrated Studies class at Ladner Virtual School. So in order to develop this proposal, you first need to understand what approach Richard takes in his classroom and what are the philosophies and goals of the Ladner Virtual School. Your proposal needs to reflect the sorts of practices and philosophies that are evident in this particular classroom, in this particular school, just as you would in any other school. We want you to identify big ideas. That's been a core message throughout this particular course. Not a thematic approach. It must be a problem-based learning approach. You need to identify in your proposals 4 or 5 key learning intentions or objectives that your students or that Richard's students will achieve during their unit. Here's a hint. Use OSVELs to inform your learning intentions and objectives. What are the big ideas? Where are they situated within OSVELs? What are the standards that you might be aiming for? Knowing the children in Richard's classroom, what then are the intentions that you have across the unit? Now, this is an outline, not a detailed unit plan. So we want you to write. It could be in the form of a letter. You could use subheadings if you wanted to, but you don't have to. It's the broad brush ideas that you have, not lesson by lesson by lesson unit outline. It's the broad overview of what will take place within the unit. What we're looking for you to do is to think about the sorts of activities that you have engaged with during the investigation and the sorts of pedagogical strategies that your teachers have demonstrated and modelled during the investigation, and think about how they could be transferred or adapted to Richard Battersby's Ladner classroom. It's unlikely that you'll be able to transfer what we have done at university directly to a classroom setting. Primary schools and universities are different places. University students and primary school students may have different needs. So your transfer of learning needs to reflect what might be done differently in a primary school classroom to a university. And along the way in the investigation, we've unpacked some of those ideas for you. If you want, you may in fact choose a completely different problem-based learning scenario. It doesn't have to be the same scenario that we used, but it may well be. There's no advantage in choosing one over the other. What we're looking for is the extent to which you have thought about what might be different in a primary school setting, that you have reflected the philosophies and approaches of the classroom and designed some integrated curriculum that reflects those differences. That is also problem-based. Must be problem-based, not thematic and not a straightforward inquiry. In your proposal to Richard, might be a letter, might be a report, consider the following things. As I've said, what are your big ideas and learning intentions? How will you approach the ideas of collaborative learning in your proposal? If you put students into groups, how will you group them? Why? Always remember throughout your proposal, you need to be justifying why you've made these particular choices. What role will questioning and higher order thinking play in your particular unit? What strategies will you put in place to foster questioning and higher order thinking by the students? What opportunities will you identify for things that you might need to teach explicitly? How will you assess? What will you assess? How will you know whether the students have met your learning intentions? So what's the alignment between the assessment strategies that you put in place and the learning intentions? They need to be consistent, or aligned is a term that's used. And of course, what resources will you require? What we're looking for in this proposal is originality. Now, when we say that, we don't mean an original idea necessarily about a problem, a different problem-based learning scenario, but it's originality in how you adapt the approach that we have modelled here at university to a primary school setting. Be creative with how you might transfer this approach to a school. I'll give you one little example. At university, we have to share our classrooms with people from other courses, other year levels, other programs across the whole campus. In your classroom, or in Richard's classroom, you're the only people who use that room. What might you do with the space? There's just one little example. You need to justify all of your choices with support from the literature. So you have to draw on the theory that supports the ideas that you're putting in place. In addition, you can use the course materials and personal reflection. Please, people, you are in third year. You're in the final semester of third year. Do not just rely on referencing online lectures. The website is full of suggested readings. Read them. Use them as your literature. That would be fine. This talks about format again. I want to repeat, it's not intended to be a detailed unit plan, but it's an outline and an explanation of the ideas and the approaches that you'd take. Here are the criteria that we're using, and they reflect the same sorts of things that I've just been talking about. Understanding the context of the classroom that Richard has and the philosophies and approaches. You can weave these in throughout. So when you're starting to talk about collaborative learning, you might weave in what Richard does, or alternatively, you could have a whole section just on the philosophy and how you think that links to what you've done. You need to identify what the big idea is that underpins your proposal, that underpins the unit that you want to do. It can't just be dinosaurs or the Olympics. What's the big idea that is at the core of what you want the children to understand? Your learning objectives need to be specific, relevant, clearly stated, and aimed at what the children will learn, not necessarily what they will do, and link them to the curriculum framework. Here's what I'm talking about before when I talked about originality up here. A new approach, innovative ideas. They might involve some risk-taking, engaging ideas for what the children will do. A mix of explicit teaching and student-centred learning. Your ideas for how you'll assess the students are included in there. Here's the literature, of course. And because you're going to be primary school teachers, your spelling, grammar, punctuation, layout, consistency of expression, all of those are crucial. This is an online submission, and you can check for the due date. And what I'd like you to do is use Word files, 12-point font please, because I'm getting older, and 2.5 centre margins. The title of the assignment and your name must be on the actual assignment, regardless of the fact that you're submitting them online. Hope this helps you understand this particular assignment. This is the crux of this course, demonstrating that you have understood the sorts of approaches that we've been modelled and demonstrate an ability to adapt those to a specific primary school setting. Good luck.